There was a time when the world laughed at Katt Williams, said he was crazy, unstable, and washed up, just like they did to DMX. These two men stood on stages, in studios, and even behind bars, trying to tell us that something was wrong, deeply wrong, but the world wasn't ready to listen, because what they were saying didn't just challenge the entertainment industry, it exposed it. They spoke of powerful men who moved in silence, of artists being used and tossed away, of deals that didn't just cost careers, but souls. And now, years later, their words are coming back to haunt the headlines. Back when DMX said, "I met the devil in God's country," most thought it was just poetic. But what if it wasn't a metaphor? What if it was a warning? Now, with lawsuits, leaks, and long overdue accountability finally catching up to people like Diddy, we're forced to rewatch those old interviews. And what's chilling isn't what we missed, but what they already told us, clearly, repeatedly, and painfully. See, the truth doesn't age, it waits, it echoes. And for DMX and Katt Williams, the echoes are louder than ever. But it took years of being dragged through the dirt, painted as unstable, addicted, paranoid, just to get people to ask the one question that mattered. What if they were telling the truth all along? But that wasn't the whole story. The entertainment world is full of polished red carpets and million-dollar smiles, but beneath that surface lies something far uglier. DMX knew it, Katt Williams knew it, and they weren't afraid to say it out loud. DMX once said, "The industry is full of people bending over desks and selling their soul just to stay relevant." It wasn't a punchline, it was a gut punch, a warning wrapped in rhythm. And when he called himself an artist in the industry, not an industry artist, he wasn't just being clever, he was drawing a line in the sand. That line would cost him everything. Behind the glitz and glamour, there's a silent pressure, not just to perform, but to conform. According to both DMX and Katt, the industry doesn't just want your talent, it wants your loyalty, your silence, your submission. And if you're not willing to play the game, you'll find out just how fast they can replace you. Katt Williams said it bluntly, "They want you to ride, bend over, do whatever it takes." He wasn't talking about contracts. He was talking about the twisted favors that come with fame. He hinted at backroom exchanges, secret parties, and invisible lines you weren't supposed to cross, or even talk about. DMX called it out in his lyrics, in interviews, on stage. He told us the music business isn't about skill anymore, it's about compliance. He saw artists paying DJs under the table, executives demanding more than just music, and a system that rewards silence and punishes truth. That's why both men got labeled crazy, not because they were unstable, but because they were uncontrollable. And in an industry built on image and illusion, being uncontrollable is the most dangerous thing you can be. But even that wasn't the darkest part. Among the names that kept surfacing in both DMX and Katt Williams' rants was one that once symbolized success in hip-hop, Sean Diddy Combs. But for those who were watching closely, Diddy wasn't just another mogul. He was a symbol of the rot beneath the surface. DMX never trusted Diddy, not even in the early days. According to a resurfaced interview, Diddy initially passed on signing X to Bad Boy Records, claiming he wasn't marketable, but everything changed when Def Jam showed interest. Suddenly, Diddy came crawling back with promises. "I'll lace your pockets. I'll double what they offered you," he allegedly said. But DMX didn't bite, and that hesitation wasn't about money. It was about instinct. He had already heard the whispers about the closed-door deals, the way young talent was exploited, and how certain names got protected while others got fed to the wolves. Then came the most chilling moment. In an old conversation, DMX didn't mince words. He accused Diddy of violating his artists. Some thought he meant financially, underpaying, locking them into unfair contracts, but others believed he meant something far worse. And now, in 2025, with lawsuit after lawsuit emerging, accusations of manipulation, coercion, and deeper, darker offenses, suddenly DMX's words don't sound like exaggerations anymore. They sound like someone who saw it happen and refused to play along. Katt Williams connected the dots too. He described a system where moguls like Diddy acted as gatekeepers, not just of fame, but of obedience. If you didn't bend, they'd break you. Not physically, but publicly. They'd paint you unstable, drown you in legal trouble, rip apart your name before you ever got a chance to explain. Diddy's empire was built on talent, but sustained by silence. And those who broke that silence, they didn't just get frozen out of the industry. They got hunted, but there was more, much more. Because what DMX hinted at next left everyone speechless. At first, people dismissed DMX's comments as aggressive metaphors, a rapper venting. But when he accused Diddy of violating his artists artists. He didn't laugh. He didn't blink. He didn't walk it back. And that made everyone uncomfortable. Was he talking about money? Ownership? Maybe. But then came the tone, the context, the look in his eyes. And now, years later, with disturbing allegations surfacing about Diddy and his conduct behind closed doors, those old interviews feel less like accusations and more like confessions whispered on behalf of the voiceless. There were rumors, whispers about private parties, contracts sealed with more than just a handshake, and artists being persuaded to do things far outside their comfort zone. DMX spoke on it. He said certain rappers were literally bending over to get record deals, and the moment that made it all too real, when DMX mentioned a fellow rapper, someone he once beefed with, who was allegedly involved in these twisted rituals. Ja Rule. According to DMX, he wasn't just wearing flashy chains and tight shirts. He was allegedly entangled with his own male stylist. DMX didn't say it to insult. He said it to expose. But it didn't stop with Ja Rule. DMX knew there were entire circles, entire crews who played along to get ahead. Artists offering more than just music to executive producers. Executives demanding more than just talent in return. It was never about skill. It was about submission. That's what DMX was trying to say when he warned young rappers about going out to dinner with label heads. He wasn't being coy. He was being cautious. He'd seen it up close. He knew the game was darker than most fans could imagine, and then there was Katt, echoing the same warnings, using different words, but pointing to the same abyss. This wasn't just a few bad actors. It was a system, a culture of exploitation, wrapped in luxury branding. So when people called DMX paranoid, they weren't listening. He wasn't paranoid. He was a prophet, and his truth was just beginning to unfold. But the next man who echoed his warnings would pay an even heavier price. If DMX was the prophet, then Katt Williams was the loudspeaker. Unfiltered, unapologetic, and almost always under fire. While the world laughed at his eccentric behavior and mugshots, very few listened to what he was actually saying. Because buried beneath the jokes and rants was a man screaming for the world to wake up. Katt didn't just hint at corruption, he named it. He said the industry was after him. He said he was being followed, framed, and forcefully silenced. And then he got arrested again and again and again, 36 times in just 3 years, for parking lot run-ins, for alleged child endangerment, for having weapons locked in boxes. Every time he blinked, there was a new headline dragging his name. It became a pattern. Whenever Katt got too loud, too close to exposing something, suddenly the cops showed up, the tabloids erupted, and his credibility took another hit. But that's the tactic. Break a man's image, and no one will believe his message. In one of his most emotional interviews, Katt broke down the moment they came for his children, not at his house, but at his office. I adopted 7 kids, raised them for 14 years. Now they say I can't have them near me? That's not protection. That's punishment. You could hear the frustration in his voice, the disbelief, the pain. He wasn't just fighting legal charges. He was fighting an invisible war against a system that wanted him quiet. And if arresting him wouldn't work, they'd try another route. Humiliation. Remember the 2014 paparazzi incident? The media said Katt and Suge Knight assaulted someone. But according to Katt, they were protecting Suge's 5-year-old son from a woman filming him while he urinated behind a dumpster. 20 years in prison for defending a child's privacy. But even that wasn't the worst part, because through it all, the arrests, the trials, the headlines, Katt kept saying the same thing. This isn't about crime. It's about control. He saw what happened to DMX. He saw the price of truth, and still, he chose to speak. But the system had another weapon, the media machine, and it was about to bury them both. The system doesn't always need handcuffs to silence someone. Sometimes, all it takes is a headline. That's the real game. Discredit the truth tellers before they can even finish their sentence. And for DMX and Katt Williams, the script was already written, page by page, printed in bold ink, broadcast on every network. With DMX, they called him a troubled rapper, a man plagued by addiction, violence, and bad decisions. Every time his name came up in the media, it was paired with words like reckless, unstable, or out of control. Even when he passed away in 2021, the New York Times labeled him as a top-selling but troubled rapper. Not visionary, not truth teller, not pioneer, just troubled. But let's look at the facts. Yes, DMX had a long history with substances. Yes, he had multiple arrests, traffic violations, weapons charges, parole violations. But here's what he never had. Public accusations of predatory behavior, no victims stepping forward, no scandals involving minors, no whispers of him abusing his position, and that's rare in the industry he came from. Meanwhile, the men around him, some with pristine images and powerful allies, were being whispered about behind closed doors. Allegations of manipulation, coercion, exploitation. Yet they were still getting awards, still headlining shows, still being celebrated as icons of Black excellence. The difference? difference? DMX wouldn't play along, and neither would Katt. Katt Williams faced the same treatment. Every time he opened his mouth to call out the corruption, suddenly he was crazy, high, unfit to be a parent. Stories were planted, narratives pushed, arrests made headlines, while dismissals and dropped charges barely made a footnote. Why? Because if you destroy the man, you erase the message. It wasn't just about making them disappear. It was about making people forget why they mattered. And yet, even after all that, the mugshots, the late-night jokes, the whisper campaigns, they were still standing, still talking, still fighting. But there's a deeper level to this fight, one that goes beyond the physical or political, a spiritual war that DMX described in chilling detail. DMX wasn't just fighting the industry. He believed he was battling something much darker, something spiritual. In interviews, he didn't hold back. He said he had been approached by the devil 3 times. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. 3 encounters, 3 offers, each one tempting him to walk away from his path, and each time he refused. To make a fair decision, you have to be aware of both sides, he said. I spoke to him. I knew who he was by what he said, and that's why I walked away. It sounds like something out of a horror film, but to DMX, it was real. This wasn't about horns and pitchforks. This was about power, temptation, and the hidden cost of fame. He wasn't trying to scare people. He was trying to save them. He saw the game and the puppet masters behind it. In one of his most talked about interviews, he described Arizona as God's country. The sunrises moved him to tears, but then something shifted. He had what he described as a direct encounter with evil, and it changed him. This has to be God's country, because I met the devil here, and if I hadn't, I wouldn't know I was strong enough to survive what came after. For a man who always infused his music with prayers, biblical references, and spiritual battle cries, this wasn't just poetic language. It was testimony. DMX believed there was a war being fought for his soul, and by resisting, he was exposing those who had already surrendered theirs. Many dismissed it, said he was losing it. That Arizona story was just another crazy moment in a long list of erratic behavior. But then came the eerie consistency. Katt Williams echoed the same theme years later. In a viral interview, he explained it this way: this isn't about race. It's about sides. You either stand with God or with the other side, and that other side is hiding in plain sight. They weren't collaborating. They weren't following a script, but their stories matched over and over again, from the manipulation to the silence to the pressure to comply to the unseen forces behind it all. And if that doesn't make you stop and think, maybe this will DMX put out 7 albums, but only 3, he said, had messages from the devil. The others, they were covered in prayer. He wasn't chasing charts. He was fighting for his soul. But what happens when 2 warriors try to warn the world and no one listens? By the time the world started catching up, Katt Williams and DMX had already drawn their line in the sand. They weren't trying to be stars anymore. They weren't trying to win awards, top charts, or get back into Hollywood's good graces. They were on a mission, not for fame, but for truth. Katt once said something that froze the room. These people ain't powerful. The enemy can't create blessings. That's why those who sold their souls gotta pretend it never happened. He didn't name names, but his meaning was crystal clear. In Hollywood, and the music industry especially, too many people had chosen comfort over conviction. And the price of that comfort? Silence. Katt and DMX chose the opposite. They chose the hard path. The one where you speak out and get torn apart for it. The one where your reputation is shredded before you even leave the stage. But they didn't stop. Both men understood this was more than a business. This was a battlefield, and they weren't battling record labels. They were battling the spirit behind them. Not every suit in the boardroom was evil, but the system, the culture, the way it grooms, exploits, and discards people, that, they believed, came from the other side. It's why DMX filled his albums with prayers, why he ended concerts with invocations, why he reminded people to lean on faith, even when the world looked lost. He wasn't performing. He was pleading. It's why Katt, for all his wild moments, never strayed from the message. He didn't care about cancel culture. He didn't fear being misunderstood, because he believed the real danger wasn't being silenced. It was being complicit. And as time passed, their voices didn't fade. They echoed, because what they were saying wasn't just relevant. It was prophetic. And now that the system is cracking, now that lawsuits are flying, and names once protected are being exposed, the world is finally looking back, finally asking, were they right the entire time? And if they were, what else have we ignored? The headlines used to mock them, now they feel like warnings. All those interviews where DMX warned us about the industry vultures. All those rants where Katt Williams talked about the price of not complying. Back then, people rolled their eyes, called it drama, said they were washed up, bitter, unstable. But now it reads like prophecy. DMX once said, "The industry industry don't give a damn about you, but it couldn't make a dime without you. That was more than a lyric. It was a thesis. He saw the machine for what it was, a polished grinder that fed on the hopes, energy, and even the morality of artists. And if you weren't willing to play by its rules, you became a problem. That's why they were labeled difficult, not because they caused chaos, but because they refused to be controlled. Both men knew what they were walking into. They saw the trap and tried to scream back at those lining up behind them, to warn them, to shield them, to show them what fame really cost when it was bought on the devil's terms. And now in 2025, as cases unfold, as allegations rise, as powerful names fall, the truth becomes clearer. DMX wasn't hallucinating. Katt Williams wasn't paranoid. They were early. Too early for a world that didn't want to believe its heroes had horns. And maybe that's the most tragic part, because while we laughed at their breakdowns, their mugshots, their erratic moments, we missed the core of what they were saying, that this isn't just an industry problem, it's a moral problem, a spiritual problem, and we're all part of it if we keep pretending it doesn't exist. Katt Williams and DMX weren't perfect. They had flaws, failures, and moments they probably wished they could erase. But so do all of us. The difference is, they chose truth over comfort. And now, long after the industry tried to bury them, their voices are rising louder than ever, because the truth doesn't die. It waits. And maybe, just maybe, the mirror they tried to hold up to us is still there waiting to be seen.